International African American Museum will open to the public next week, Tuesday, June 27th. Today, I talk one-on-one with the chairman of the International African American Museum's Board of Trustees, Wilbur Johnson, for a preview of what to expect at the museum for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Wilbur Johnson, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be with you.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. As you know, obviously, you are the chairman of the International African American Museum's Board of Trustees. And I know that you all are getting prepared for a big grand opening on Tuesday. I know that it's been also 2 decades in the making with design, construction, and other delays along the way. But the International African American Museum, as I mentioned, will officially open to the public on June 27th, next week, Tuesday. Where are you emotionally right now?
That's a very good question, and it's a question that no one has asked of me until you just asked it, and because it is sort of the culmination of a very long struggle, and if you've kept up with this project, and I know you have, we've had our shares of ups and downs. And we've had some challenges, and as we approached what we thought would be the original opening date, we had additional challenges. So I think it's fair to say that what we are experiencing now is a combination of relief, a combination of excitement, a combination of aspiration and hope that this institution will reflect what we hope it will reflect in terms of honoring the Africans who arrived on the shores of Charleston these many years ago.
And what would you talk about those additional challenges? When you go back to January, how many more additional challenges were there when it came to attempting at that particular time to open the museum?
So what we faced, the museum was designed many years ago, and the original design, the humidification equipment in the museum originally was designed for a space that was not going to contain many artifacts. That would basically be an open space primarily. But over the years, as we began to contemplate how we wanted the museum to look, and as new staff people came into the museum, the plans for the museum changed. And we began to believe that we needed to place some artifacts in the museum. And so what happened is that the original design was for no artifacts, or very few. The plans changed to where we wanted to place some artifacts, so we had to change the system somewhat to account for the fact that we would now have some artifacts in the museum, and we needed a humidification system that could account for those artifacts.
Now, how much did that system cost for you all?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yes, sir. Sorry about the delay here, but how much did that system cost you all prior to putting those artifacts in?
It cost, the system originally, the original cost, as I recall, was probably several $100,000 for the original system. Fortunately, we did not have to spend many more additional dollars on on redesigning or replacing the system. What we had to do was to be sure that the system was upgraded enough and tested enough so that it could account for some of the things that we had decided that we wanted to do within the museum.
Mm. So when did you test that particular system?
We began testing the system months ago as we began to prepare for opening. This plan has been in place for quite some time, and so we began to test the system in earnest, probably in last year, maybe mid last year, 2022, as we contemplated an opening in 2023. We began to seriously determine whether the system would accomplish what we needed it to accomplish. Mm-hmm.
And what did you want to accomplish back in 2022 versus now?
Well, as I said earlier, the original plan was that we would have heating and cooling mostly designed for a room that did not have many artifacts. So when we made sort of a change in plan to include more artifacts than we had originally planned for, we had to test the system to be sure that it could keep the space cool or keep the temperature in the space adequate enough so that whatever artifacts we had in the room would not be harmed or suffer any damage in any way. Because part of what we're doing, we're borrowing artifacts from other places, and we have to ensure these other institutions that we're going to return those artifacts in the condition that they were when they were lent to us.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how long do you have this loaner, for instance, for lack of a better word?
It varies. It varies from depending upon what exactly it is that we are borrowing, the institution from which we are borrowing the artifact from. So there's no standard length of time. We could have an artifact for 30 days on loan. We could have it on loan for 2 or 3 months. This simply depends upon the nature of the transaction.
And so, what is the current room temperature for these artifacts right now?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm not a technical guy, but actually, we simply need the temperature and the humidity. It really has to do with humidification. That we don't have a room that has too much humidity in it that would damage a painting, for example, or damage a sculpture or something of that kind. So really, it sort of depends upon what you have in the room. But we try to keep the temperature at a level that there will not be any chance of damage to whatever it is we have in that room.
So, Mr. Wilbur, let me ask you, in total, how many artifacts do you all have at the museum right now?
Quintin, I could not tell you the exact total. We do have some that we have borrowed. We had plans for a major exhibition that we were going to have in place when we planned to open the museum in January. And we had that contract all lined up. But then when we were not able to open in January, we had to let that exhibition go. And at some point we hopefully will be able to have it come back to Charleston. But we could not keep it here in Charleston. We could not have it here in Charleston because of the humidification issues. But we will have from time to time some significant pieces that are going to be loaned to us by other institutions and by also private individuals as well.
So how many private citizens and how many, other donations do you expect in total?
We expect a significant number. Probably most of that will be coming from other institutions. We do have mementos and artifacts that will be given to us or presented to us on loan from private individuals. People have provided photographs. People have provided books. People have provided Bibles, all of those things that you could think of when you're thinking about historical pieces and family mementos and all of those things that people treasure and they want to share with others. Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Wilbur, going back to that, obviously that that exposition, I should say, that you all initially planned for January, that now you had to let go temporarily. So, what's the timetable as far as getting that back to Charleston?
Well, we hope to be able to get it back as soon as possible. It was an exhibition that probably has moved on to another institution and will be there for a period of time. But we remain in contact with the owners of those artifacts, the institution that owns those artifacts, and we think that we have a fair opportunity, a fair chance to have that traveling exhibition come back to Charleston in the not too distant future. Hopefully, in the immediate future at some point. So we'll be looking forward to making that happen.
Now, are these private owners, or donors, I should say? Are these people local or regional?
Both. We
Wow.
have local Charlestonians and folks in the Low Country area who have family mementos that they wanted to share and have shared with the museum. We have a number of folks outside the Charleston area who have also contacted us to say that I have this piece that you might be interested in. We'd love for you to see it. If you think it's worthwhile, we'd love to place it on loan with you for a while and that sort of thing. So we've had contacts from all over the Low Country and outside of the Low Country as well.
Wow. And how many of those are from out of the Low Country?
I'd say most of the contacts we have had are from folks that are within the Low Country, Charleston,
Yes,
Beaufort,
oh, yes.
that area of our state. But we have significant interest in this museum from all over the state and folks outside of the state as well. But I think that the majority of the materials that we have from private individuals are probably from the Low Country.
Wow. Okay. So let me fast forward to Tuesday. Obviously, tickets have been sold out, I believe, for the opening of the museum on Tuesday.
That's my understanding.
Oh, yes, sir. So how many people are local and how many people are from out of state that are actually coming to the museum on Tuesday?
I could not give you an exact count or an accurate count, but my understanding is that we have a significant percentage of the individuals who have purchased tickets and who are wanting to visit the museum on opening week are from outside of the Low Country, and obviously we welcome those folks to the museum. We welcome them to the Charleston area. We welcome them to the Low Country, and most of all, we welcome them to Gadsden's Wharf, where many of our ancestors first touched upon the shores of this country.
Now, Mr. Wilbur, I know that LEED LEED certified buildings are not only healthier, safer, and better for the environment, they have become the norm in the building industry. And I know that since African culture promotes living in harmony with nature, why was the decision made not to seek LEED certification for the museum or the facility using solar power?
Well, I think principally, to be frank with you, it was a function of funding and how do we best utilize the funding that we had available at the time the building was being designed and the first attempts at construction. We've had some success in fundraising over the years, but we were not in a position to go all out in terms of making some of the environmental based decisions that were made. We had to make some decisions about some of the things that we needed to do with respect to the revenue and funding that we had on hand. Now, hopefully, at some point, we can go back and revisit some of those decisions. But our goal at the time was to be sure that we were able to build this institution and open it as best we could.
Now, how much revenue did you have on hand prior to construction, and how much funding did you have prior to construction?
Yeah, we had, as we began construction, we had substantial amount of revenue on hand. I think originally, if I can recall, the original quote for construction was somewhere around 100 million, 80 to 100 million dollars, as I recall, and the actual price came close, if not exceeded that number, and so that's the kind of of funding that we needed to achieve in order to build this institution.
So, how much funding? How much funding do you need right now as the museum opens?
Well, we will always be, to some degree, trying to raise money to keep the museum going forward, to keep it active, to make sure that we are presenting and able to present programs that we hope to be able to present, to ensure the safety of the building, the structure, for security reasons, to pay our employees, and all of those things that any normal business has to do. So, Quintin, I think it's fair to say that we will always be, to some degree, in a fundraising mode.
So, Mr. Wilbur, let me ask you then: will you all set up some sort of advisory board to make certain that fundraising happens?
Yes, we obviously the current board is involved in fundraising. We have people on staff, and development folks on staff, whose job it is to assist and to go out and market the museum for purposes of fundraising. We have a national advisory board that also assists us with fundraising as well.
Now, how many of those people are helping with that altogether?
Our fundraising staff our on-board fundraising staff is not huge. We probably have maybe 4 or 5 people who are fully dedicated to actually raising funds. That is, folks who are on staff. We will be hopefully increasing that number as the museum grows. That's our plan. But again, the board is fully engaged in fundraising as well, and we do use from time to time outside help that is, we engage folks who are professionals in the field to assist us in fundraising.
So, what's that? I mean, that outside help. How have they helped you thus far to reach your goal?
They've helped us develop plans for fundraising. They helped us identify folks who may be able to give to the museum. They've helped us develop prospectuses and plans to present to those folks who may be able to give to the museum. So those are the kinds of things that contractors and others have been able to assist us with in terms of fundraising.
And how many contractors do you all currently have?
I cannot give you a precise number, but we have very few contractors who are assisting with fundraising at any given time. The vast majority of the contractors that we are working with at this point have to do with the construction issues involving the museum. And so that's really where our focus has been in the past several months.
So, what construction issues do you have right now leading up to Tuesday?
Fortunately, knock wood, none. We think we're fully ready for opening come Tuesday. We believe we have our humidification issues under control. We are, and I think to some degree always will be, concerned about security. We are in an open environment. We do not have a wall, for example, around the institution, and so we remain vigilant about security, and I think that will be something that we will continue to be cognizant of and concerned with as the museum continues to grow.
And let me go back to, obviously, as you talked about earlier, the artifacts. Why and when, Mr. Wilbur, and by whom was the decision made to call the project a museum, but not have a permanent collection of artifacts like most museums and facilities for housing broader collections?
Well, let me. Maybe I was a little bit unclear. We do have some permanent artifacts in the museum, but that was not when the museum was being designed years ago.
Yeah.
That was not going to be the primary focus of the museum. You probably have been to the National Museum in D.C., which is full of artifacts. That was not our original intent. We didn't envision that the museum would have so many artifacts. But as plans changed, we began to believe that what we were trying to do would benefit from having some additional artifacts. So that's how this plan changed over the years, and so now we do have some focus on assisting our programs with artifacts.
Now, let me divide it up again. How many permanent artifacts do you have, and how many loaners do you have?
I'd say my belief, Quintin, would be that probably 2/3 of the artifacts that we have or will be on display in the museum are permanent. The other third or so will be on loan or traveling or borrowed from other institutions.
Speaking of traveling, Mr. Wilbur, and I'm thinking about where I grew up on the east side of Charleston in downtown Charleston, but how will the museum reach out to those people who can't afford or get to the museum?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We have discussed and made a point that our focus, or one of our focuses, should be that we involve the entire community in this project. And by that, we also mean the communities that are native to this area, that are native to the Charleston Low Country, and that are native to this part of Charleston, the east side of Charleston. Now, obviously, we are inviting the entire state, the entire community, the entire country, international visitors to the museum. That's why it's called the International African American Museum.
Sure.
But we have spoken among ourselves, and we fully understand that one of our charges should be to include Charlestonians in this project, and more specifically, the young people, the students, the children in Charleston in this project. And so we will be making every effort to reach out to those folks.
Have you reached out to them thus far?
Yes, we have folks on staff who are involved in education, who will be reaching out to the school districts. We have people on the board who see that as a focus. Our CEO, Dr. Matthews, sees that as a primary focus. And so we will be making every effort to reach out to the Charleston County School District, to other school districts, and to students within those school districts and within those schools.
Now, Mr. Wilbur, let me ask you this: since the designing and obviously the process of designing this particular museum, I should say, has there been any pushback to your plans from the Black community?
I wouldn't say that there's been quote unquote pushback. What we have had is Black folks, African Americans, expressing to us that they have a dog in this fight, if you will, that they want to have and see an institution that takes into account the desires, the interests, the aspirations of African Americans in this community, and the histories of African Americans in this community. And so, we have made a conscious decision and a conscious effort to try to include all of those perspectives in the museum programming, and not only in the museum programming, but in the activities of the museum, where we are able to allow businesses to operate at museum functions, to provide, for example, programming, to provide food, to sell books, and all of those things. We want to be able to make it available to African Americans in this area, in the Low Country.
And I'm probably being redundant, Mr. Wilbur, but how many local African American organizations and citizens concerned and knowledgeable about the and African American studies were actually consulted in the planning of this museum?
I could not give you a precise number. We have several African American members of the board who were involved. Dr. Bernie Powers, for example, over at the College of Charleston. Dr. Butler,
Yes.
who is director of the Avery Center for African American Research, is a board member. We've had other members of the communities, of African American communities, that we have consulted about museum planning, about programming within the museum, and we continue to do that. This is not a one-shot thing.
Right.
We will continue to consult with African Americans who have an interest in this museum.
Now, Mr. Wilbur, how were their recommendations and criticisms how were their criticisms and recommendations, that is, incorporated into the plans for the museum?
We have taken to heart some of the thoughts, some of the criticisms that we've heard over the years about the museum's focus, about how the museum should be programmed, and what are some of the activities that we should be involved in the museum's programming and focuses. And we have reached out to those folks to understand their thoughts and their ideas, and to make sure that those of us who are on the board are aware of those thoughts and ideas, and that we ensure that our CEO and that our staff are understanding and listening, and that we're incorporating some of those ideas into our program.
And quickly, Mr. Wilbur, how exactly will this museum actually benefit the African American community here in Charleston?
Well, our hope is that the museum's programming will benefit our African American communities by ensuring that the story of our arrival on the shores of Charleston is told, and told adequately and properly, and in a way that that our history will be known, and that the contributions that African Americans made to this community and to this state and to the world will be fully understood. And we also hope to generate activities that will provide some revenue, some earning opportunities for folks here in the Low Country. And all of our programming will hopefully include that aspect as well.
Wilbur Johnson with the International African American Museum. Thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.